Hello and welcome to another episode of Pep Talks with Jeanne. I'm your host, Jeanne Pepper. I started doing Pep Talks as a way to inspire you to do intentional acts of kindness and to further the goals of Blaze It Forward. Over the past 6 years, Pep Talks has evolved and I now use it for interviewing key people in the community who volunteer at the next level. Some start foundations to further their philanthropic goals, some work at the most needed and influential nonprofits, and others dedicate their lives to causes that are local and even global to make this world a better place. Today, I'm excited to have Heather Kline. She's a local philanthropist and a friend of mine who I think has a lot to share about how you can make your life happier and more abundant. So let's hear what Heather has to say.
Thanks, Jeanne.
I'm so glad you decided to join us
I'm
today.
super honored that you asked me.
Yay. So Heather has some very responsible positions in our community. She volunteers a lot of her time. And do you want to tell us exactly what you've been up to?
Yeah, right now I am the board chair of Jewish Federation Orange County. I've held pretty much every other position in Jewish Federation over the last bunch of years. And I'm also a member of the National Women's Philanthropy Board for Jewish Federation North America. And I just chaired the International Lion of Judah Conference, where we had about 15,000 female philanthropists convening and learning and being philanthropists.
Wow. Where was that held?
That was in Arizona a couple months ago. We raised $25 million.
15,000 people were there?
1,500.
Okay,
1,500
yeah. People. Okay.
Raised $25 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was, I'm assuming that was successful.
It was amazing, yes. And it was an amazing experience.
That's very cool. For people that don't know what Federation is or what they do or what... Tell us more about that.
Our Jewish Federation Orange County is part of a network of 146 Jewish federations nationally and North America. And we are part of a group that raises money, and we work with 3 core partners, the Joint Distribution Committee, Jewish Agency for Israel, and World Ort. Those are our 3 major partners to support Jewish community locally and globally and in Israel. All of the work is for humanitarian purposes. It's nonpartisan, and we are able, because of our long history of relationships with these partners, to be able to get support where it needs to go really fast and really effectively.
That's great. And I'm sure they've been involved in giving support during the times of crisis in Israel.
Immediate support, yeah. They're boots on the ground, ready to go. So when you donate to Jewish Federation, you're supporting your community locally, and you're also supporting your Jewish communities around the world that need our help.
Let me ask you about opportunities for high school students in Jewish Federation. What do you know?
Well, we have a really amazing program called Student to Student, which is unfortunately in very high demand right now because of the unfolding of tremendous amounts of anti-Semitism that is rampant in our communities right now. But it started to be able to bring students as ambassadors into high school students going into high schools, talking about what it's like to be a Jewish student in high school, and demystifying and talking about holidays and identity and different rites of passage, bar mitzvahs, and things like that. And it's been very well received. We did about 1,000 hours of presentations into local high schools, and there are about 45 kids in the program right now, and it's just a really tremendous opportunity to hone your speaking skills and be able to how better for kids to learn than one student to another about the differences and the similarities of people we don't know.
That's interesting. So is that local, or is that all Jewish federations, or is that specific to Orange County?
It's a specific program of our Jewish Federation in Orange County. There are similar types of programs nationally, but it's at Orange County. So we have Orange County high school kids going to Orange County high schools.
Okay, so if you are a high school student and you are interested in community hours and you're Jewish, I'm assuming you need to be Jewish to do this.
Yes.
Okay.
But you don't have to be any kind of Jewish. You can be
non-denominational
non-denominational
Jewish.
You can be secular.
It's about the Jewish experience.
It's about being a Jewish kid in Jewish schools
and it's
in non-Jewish schools.
And really, these days, if you're 1/8 Jewish, you're Jewish.
Right. So it's not any. You don't have to know anything or be anything special.
Yeah. So you can contact Jewish Federation of Orange County,
yes,
and they will put you on the list.
Absolutely.
Okay,
we welcome that.
That's a great opportunity. And how much time, like, would you say every week do you spend?
It
with this?
very much depends. This is my third year being the board chair. The first year was a lot more time. I would say, oh gosh, I don't know. I have a really good partner now as a CEO. So we've had a lot of transition, in our community in terms of that organization. So for a while, I was even kind of acting as the interim CEO because we were doing a search, and that was a lot of time and a lot of executing of tasks that I didn't know how to do. I just kind of figured out with teamwork and best efforts and got us at least to be able to maintain the stability of the really high level of professionals who work at the organization while we were recruiting a CEO. So it really depends.
Yeah.
But, that they're very mindful of my volunteer status, but I just feel like really committed to each of the things that I do. So it's hard to answer that question.
Okay. Not a big deal, but really the point is that you could be doing anything. I mean, you are an attorney by profession,
Mm-hmm.
so this is a big deal that you've dedicated your life to basically volunteering your time.
It's really a privilege. I feel like the people that I'm the most attracted to in this phase of my life are people who have a passion and they do something with that. It doesn't have to be the same passion that I do. People become teachers. People go back to school. People run all kinds of nonprofits, or they volunteer in a multitude of ways. And some people are caring for aging parents. Some people are caring for disabled children. There's all kinds of ways that, people live meaningful lives. But I have a lot of hobbies, but I need to have a lot of value and purpose to my life. And this is kind of why I continue to do it. And now I'm really passionate about training other leaders and getting other people kind of down the road of leadership, because when I first started doing all this volunteer work, I did not view myself as a leader. So I think that's really an important thing that I want to convey to anybody who kind of has goodness in their heart and they don't necessarily see themselves in a big position. A lot of us start that way. We just kind of do it one act at a time.
Were you always community service oriented in your lifetime, or did this start at a certain point?
Yeah, I think I've always volunteered for different types of things in my life. A lot of it had to do with the Jewish community, but I think that I had free time to make choices with. As my children got older, it was my choice where to spend my time, and I find having something really meaningful where I feel like I'm going to make an impact on my community and, other people's lives in small and big ways that I may never know is very fulfilling to me.
That's beautiful. Are your children also as community service minded as you are?
My children they're givers. One of my daughters is a doctor. She's a physician. And one of my daughters is getting a master's degree in special education. So they have chosen professions, and I think that I've raised three. They're in their 20s, so your 20s is kind of a really transitional time, and I think they've watched me and my husband and our commitment to community, and so I think it's ingrained in them as something that's important to be a piece of the pie. And I think in different times of your life, you have more and less time to do. To participate in those things. But small things add up to big things.
They absolutely do. I know that, I don't know how it was that you were able to incentivize your children to follow in your footsteps, because not all kids do what we want them to do.
That is true.
It's kind of amazing when our adult children actually listen to what we have told them when they were children and do something meaningful with their lives, like we want them to do.
It's really interesting because I have the voices in my head of my parents, and my parents were incredibly philanthropic in personal ways. They weren't part of big systems of philanthropy, but they were very much givers to the people that they were able to help. And I found a lot of this stuff out after they died. I found out they were quiet about the way they helped people. And I know that both of my parents were beneficiaries of the support of Jewish community financially.
Wow.
And I think it took me until I was kind of a very solidly middle-aged adult to be able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together So I did it because it felt good, and I met these amazing people, especially the women, along the way, and we formed friendships and bonds, and we learned together, and we, sang together, and went to Israel together, and raised money together, and did all this stuff that was actually really fun. Not all of it is fun. Some of it is really hard. But I think that I realized this part of my story is where the threads all came together from things that were right in front of me my whole life. That I like to talk about this red notebook that we found in my grandmother's home when she died, and in it had letter after letter congratulating my father for receiving scholarships to college and then medical school. And my grandmother was so proud to receive these scholarships, but these scholarships came from the Jewish community. So there was a huge aha of paying it forward and paying it back. So that kind of came to me in the last 10 years.
That's really quite a family legacy.
Yeah.
So in some ways, this is karma almost for your family.
Kind of is. I think that when we are asked to tell our stories, it sounds kind of crazy, but sometimes we don't really even know all of it. We can't really put the pieces of the stories together. So the more we talk about it and the more we share it, the more things sort of interweave in cool aha moments.
Yes, I don't believe in coincidences.
Yeah, I don't either.
And especially like the timing of when you found that notebook, when that became part of your reality, was really part of your journey.
Yeah, it was. And the person who pointed it out to me, we were having this really cool conversation, on a bus in Israel on a women's mission, and she was like, "That's your story. That's your story." And I went, "Oh, okay, you're right. Oh my gosh, that was right in front of me." So I think I love when things fill in the weaves.
Yeah, when things actually start to make sense.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that moment.
Yeah.
But that's quite amazing, though, that you actually were able to find something like that.
Yeah.
What other coincidences have happened in your life that were signposts to you that you were on the right path?
I have to think about that.
I know it's a tough one, but I mean, I'm sure if you look back that you'll remember, you could probably point to different things that happened in your life that were kind of like, oh, that's interesting that happened, like coincidental things. I don't know. Some people are more aware of it than others.
I'm pretty aware of these things.
Yeah. I have found them to be like almost startling sometimes when I think back on the things that have happened.
I think you have to really be awake to see them and to process them.
Yes. It's hard to sometimes process these things because they're so shocking sometimes, like the coincidences.
I don't believe in coincidences. I just think there's meaning behind things, and you kind of have to continue to add to your basket and see where it fits in, even if you can't at that moment.
Especially when you're young, it's really hard to see it. But, when I look back on my life, I'll give you a very good example of this. On the night before we got married, my husband and I, our rehearsal dinner, we discovered that our grandparents knew each other.
Oh, wow.
They had met 50 years before, when our grandfathers worked on the same top secret project.
Oh, wow.
In Newport News, Virginia, for what would become NASA. It was called the NACA at the time.
Wow.
So my grandfather was an aerospace engineer. His was an architect. And his grandfather designed the wind tunnels that they used for the propeller experiments that my grandfather was working on.
Wow.
And they actually double dated. Our fathers were born 1 year apart from each other in the same city, same hospital. And the only reason that they did not stay in communication is my family moved out to the West Coast, to California, so that my grandfather could work for the Aerospace Corporation. And his grandfather went on to work as an architect in Cleveland.
That's amazing.
So that was the separation. And then his father and mother my husband's parents moved to California.
Okay.
And we obviously met here in California. So like at the time that it happened, I didn't have I couldn't see that this was a signpost. I just saw it as a really strange thing. But, when you look back on your life and you look at all the signposts like that, it kind of tells you that you were on a path that was...
Yeah, I think one just kind of came to me. It's, I think that spirituality is you asked me about spirituality earlier, and spirituality is a really important part of my life. And so what I do is fulfilling in the way that it's tangible in terms of raising money for people and programs and things, but it's also very intangible, and it feeds my spiritual life. And that is something that people don't always ask about, and they're not always comfortable talking about. But it's a very thriving part of me. And so this volunteer work really feeds into that fulfillment. It kind of reminds me of something that I kept private for a really long time. And that was that when I was 24 years old, I was home from a semester of law school, and my mother was a teacher, and she was a teacher at a public high school near. This is not where I thought this was going today. She was a teacher, and she would wake up really early to go to school to teach her students, and I didn't get up, but she always came in to say, good morning and goodbye and I love you, and she did that always. And then one morning I was getting ready to go back to school, and she hadn't come in that morning, and it just was very weird to me. And so I got in my car and I drove to the school that she taught at. I had never been there before. I went in and I said, "Can I go see my mom?" And they were like, "Oh, sure." I went up to her classroom. She introduced me to all of her students, and she was so proud, and I gave her a hug and I left, and that was the last time I ever saw her.
Oh, Heather. Wow.
And that was a signpost.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That must not be easy to talk about.
Yeah, I just thought of that. I was like, sometimes these things are...
but you knew that was something very strange, that you actually had done that. It had never happened before.
Yeah.
You're making me cry too. That's so incredible.
So I do think that you have to be awake for these,
you
spiritual
couldn't see
moments.
that at 24. You couldn't see that was a signpost to you.
No. And so I believe that. That's what I was saying to you before.
I just got chills from that.
Like
story.
you're never sorry that you go, that you show up. Showing up is like...
No.
Really important.
And you're never sorry you wore a bicycle helmet.
That's right.
I learned that the hard way.
It's true.
But yeah, that's really touched me.
So I believe in spiritual signposts.
That was one. It was just a feeling that you had.
Yeah, I just went. I couldn't explain it. And I didn't tell anybody about that for a long time.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's like, it's almost a trauma.
Yeah.
It's a part of that trauma,
yeah.
And you kind of bury it because it's so hard to really think about it. But probably now, as a more mature person, you can see that it was meaningful.
I think it has led to the culture of I love you in my family. I grew up in a very I love you home. And so there's never a departure or a phone call that doesn't end with I love you. So
that's beautiful.
I think that's important, whether it's my friends or my family.
So you lost your mother, obviously, when you were very young.
I did.
But you still went on to live an abundant life, a beautiful life, do beautiful things, and help other people, and you're happy. You have a beautiful life, and I'm sure your mother and father would be very proud of. How is it that you were able to, even with that hardship and that trauma, that you were able to go forward and not be bitter and not be... I mean, people ask me this all the time, so I'm going to ask you that too, because it seems so... it's apparent to me, but if you can articulate it, and I think you can.
I think part of it is, in the beginning, is a survival mode. And then it was very daunting to the thought of having children. I thought, well, how am I going to have children, especially daughters, if I don't have, and you just kind of realize that there's a lot inside of you that you don't know is there. And, when people look at other people who've been through very hard things that people know about, because I think people go through very difficult things that other people don't know about. But
yes.
When things are known to others, as it is in the case of your loss, nobody wants to be brave, right? Nobody wants to step forward into the light. It's nobody else.
Nobody wants the problem that comes with being brave.
Nobody wants that.
No.
And but I think that there are spaces and energies inside of us that kind of push us in the direction of forward. And I don't know. And I think feeling, we all go through hard things. I very much believe in outside help. I think it's really important to talk about help and to be open about the fact that you have sought help. And I always tell my kids, help is called help because it's helpful. And I think that's really important. So I believe in that, and I believe in an active spiritual life. And it's kind of,
So leaning on others when you're going through a hard time, or whatever that help may be, whether it's professional, whether it's family, friends. I completely agree with you. I don't think I'd be sitting here with sanity now if not for this community that supported us, propped us up. One of our volunteers here today, Helen, she basically moved into my house and kept me vertical.
I think one of the things that is really powerful to me, I don't know if you remember the first time we met.
Yes, I do. It was at a meal that we were at someone's house. It was a community event.
Okay, then one of the first times we spoke, I went to a memorial service for Blaze.
Oh.
And I found what I did find by early loss and tragedy is that people, because they don't know what to say, they say nothing. And I was determined not to be afraid of hard moments and hard spaces. I think that is something that comes from having been through them. And so I remember I went up to talk to you. We didn't know each other and what was there to say, but I don't know what we said, but I could have not. I just believe in showing up. You just have to show up.
Yeah, there's never the right thing to say when it comes to something like that. You're just there.
You're just there.
You just say, I'm here.
And I think it's really important. I think that's also the value of community. And
yes.
Like we were saying earlier, community can be so many different things all in one life, and some kind of fade away and some emerge and some you didn't ask to be a part of, but you are. And then you know, one of the things I read about the reason that Jews say Kaddish for a whole year is because at the very end of the year, you don't know who's there for their first day, and that they might need you the way someone was there for you in the beginning. And whether you adhere to that that tradition or not, there's something to it, to be able to be there for other people, even if the experiences aren't the ones you've had.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, but you're right. So it was, not only was it your community that helped you through your hard times, staying purposeful. Yeah.
It wasn't immediate. I was pretty lost for a while.
That's a big loss.
Yeah, I was pretty lost for a while. But I'm here, and I think feeling like when hard things have imprinted upon you, that they're not always going to feel in every moment as anguishing as they are in some moments. And I think once I sort of was able to understand that and be able to go, this is just going to be a part of my life and a part of my story, it just I didn't have to judge my feelings when things were hard or when I was sad or when, things were out of the blue, just kind of the bolts into your heart.
Yeah, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I find that that the grief that I've experienced from losing my son when he was so young, it's left an imprint on me that isn't necessarily negative. It's almost, it makes you feel more empathetic towards other people when you've experienced these types of losses, I believe. It also gives you more gratitude for the things that you have.
Probably hard for people to understand, but I've seen it because I've watched you guys both in public and in a group of friends just walk into the light, and it's something to be in the penumbra of that positivity, because I think there's just value in standing together, and
there really is. And I believe that a lot of the people in our world that are making it less beautiful, that some of those people are not supported. And,
I think they're hurt. I think hurt people, and I think that there's a lot of pain out there. So I think that it's really nice to be a part of a community where you show up for people and they show up for you, and what that feels like and what that looks like or what that is in any given moment. But you start to get that muscle memory of like, oh, I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna leave a message. I'm gonna leave a dinner. I'm gonna make a donation in their honor. I'm going to write a letter. Of course, I have a very soft spot for young adults who lose parents. So that's always the first time I will always reach out. But, this is just the story. I'm 57 years old, and, a lot happens in those 57 years. So
there's nobody that gets to be over 50 that hasn't had trauma.
Right.
Unless you were immaculate conception and
living under a rock. I don't know.
Everybody's experienced some form of unhappiness. You can't have happiness without unhappiness. That I've learned also.
Yeah, I don't really measure. I think I don't measure so much in happy. People will say, "Oh, you're only as happy as your, most unhappy child," or those silly sayings.
Oh yeah, yes.
I think it's about for me personally. It's about with my children. I want them to be able to cope with hard things that happen because they will happen, and build resilience and independence and values. And I do see that in them, which makes me really, really proud. But I think for me, it's about being content and being grateful. And then when I feel content and when I feel grateful, I feel braver. I just feel braver to be able to do things. I want to continue. I want to go to, every national park. I want to.
Me too.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we've talked about this.
Absolutely.
I want to go to new places, and I want to read new books, and I want to talk. I want to learn because.
Yes, that's like the reason for getting up in the morning.
Yeah.
All the new things you can learn, right?
Right.
Yeah, that was always I was so happy every morning. I shouldn't say was. But they're definitely, I don't know about you, but with my loss, there's a before and after. Mm-hmm. And before, I was generally living the life. Mm-hmm. I was very grateful, and I would wake up every day just yay, I get to go learn something new today. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll meet someone new today. Maybe I'll, find out something I didn't know before. I'll read a new book today, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. But I was excited about that. I still am, but it definitely changes you when you struggle. Mm-hmm. Some days are more of a struggle than others. But I find that staying purposeful and consciously deciding to focus on things that are positive has made a difference.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Yeah, and that's something that people can learn. It
100% is something you can learn. And I think that, I guess you've asked me here because I'm a leader in the Jewish community, but I didn't start out to be a leader. It wasn't like a big dream of mine, or I want this job and this title and this. It was just doing things that made me feel good and giving. That's the secret sauce of whatever the giving is, whether it's actions or, finances or whatever, or in best case scenario it's all of the above, and those are things that are learned, I think. And so I'm grateful that I know that that's what makes me feel good, and I have the ability to continue to do that. So whenever something's kind of I'm ending being the board chair, I'm kind of what's my next?
Yeah, what is next?
I don't know. I mean, have some passion areas and things that I want to work on within the Jewish community, because I feel like I've just had so much the benefit of experience now, and I want to help train younger, adults into stepping into leadership, because I know that I didn't start out to be in charge of anything really. But I was able to say in small places and small spaces, Hineni, I'm here. So would you do this with me? Yes. Will you go to this with me? Yes. Do you, it wasn't a convincing of values. It was how to put those values into actions. And that is, and I think women have the unique ability to grab the hand of another woman and pull her up with her.
That's an interesting thing you just said.
Yeah.
Do you think that you have a responsibility as a woman to do that?
Yes, but I also think it's so much fun. I love to be able to, I think I have the responsibility to mentor, and share, because I know how much I've benefited from that. And there's such great women who have achieved great things, but who are great and who feel the way I want to feel by doing the things that I want to do. Mm-hmm. So when I see people, starting cool projects or doing something with those projects or raising great amounts of money for need, I think that's amazing. and I always feel like I can do more. So it's kind of the maintaining of the feeling of humility of what I'm doing is a lot and there's so much more to do, but I'm just right where I'm supposed to be, which is not easy sometimes.
Yeah. What's the best, worst mistake you've ever made?
You mean in leadership or just
in life?
Probably the best, worst mistake I ever made was going to law school. I didn't want to go to law school. Sorry, you
How did that end up happening?
It was a very strong influence of my father. He really wanted his daughters to be able to support themselves no matter what. It was sort of that. But I found it very soul crushing, and I am so grateful that my volunteer work actually benefits from that education. But it was not my favorite stage of life. I will say that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you somewhat. I had the same situation. I had parents that encouraged me to be independent and to never have to depend on a man for anything, right?
I got the same messaging.
Right. I got that messaging, and I also had a mother that was a teacher.
I did too.
Right.
Yeah.
And and grew up around the same time that you did. I mean, within hours of each other. So, yeah, I got that messaging, and I went on to become a litigator, which is soul crushing. But I mean, it doesn't have to be. I think for women, it can be very soul crushing because it's very difficult to be a woman and to be in a business like that.
It's also the absolute opposite of empathy. So
it's not a valued skill.
No,
not in litigation.
But I do think it has helped me to create a confidence in my ability to speak, to advocate,
yes,
to comprehend, and for that, education is never a waste. It just
never
was not my favorite time of life.
Oh, I think that the Jewish community has greatly valued by having a lawyer as the head of Jewish Federation for the last 3 years. So there's nothing wrong with that, Heather. That's an interesting thing sometimes it's interesting because at least for me, like when I look back on all of the things that happened, and some of them weren't great, everything always seemed to still end up going to a good place. Regardless, it's kind of like, when one door closes, a window opens. So
sometimes you have to look for that window, though.
You have to look for that window, but I've always looked for the window.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I need to stress to like the next generation and to people that are struggling now, that as hard as things may be, hard things lead to better things.
I've kind of learned that I can do hard things, and I've also become very comprehensive of the fact that people are suffering. People go through things that you don't necessarily know about or have the right to know about.
That's right.
And so I really am trying to hone my thoughts of maybe this isn't what it seems, or where does this come from? I don't know, because I think that there's goodness in all of us, but I think that there's struggle in all of us too. So I think that hones empathy, having empathy, even though you might be empathic for something you don't understand. Somebody's grumpy with you. Well, we don't know why, and so I remember asking my grandmother lots of questions about, actually, I remember asking my mother lots of questions about like family history, because I was really interested in where I'd come from. And my mother said to me, not everything is your business, meaning like respect people's privacy. And I thought, well, isn't it my right to know? It's my family. But that stuck with me, because not everybody is able to or needs to be able to share what is going on inside of them or with personal relationships. So I just try to hold people gently.
Yeah, that's wise.
Yeah. Doesn't always work, but I try.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you always had good relationships with your children?
Yes, I have, but I don't really, I've always been the mother, not the friend. And I have, each kid is so different, and what motivates them or deters them is so different, that raising a child who had similar traits to me, those parts I would understand, and then pieces of the kids who were different than me. I trying to learn how to think in a way that you aren't. But, it was a pretty comprehensive job. My husband worked a lot, but we were both two active, present parents. And I won't say it was always easy, but my goal wasn't to get along with them. My goal was to parent them. So now there's nobody whose company I enjoy more.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So what's your next big project?
I don't know. Maybe I'll become a podcaster with you, Jeanne.
I think you should. I see a future.
I don't know. I really love the national board that I sit on, and I'm hoping to get on some national committees for leadership development. I'm going to try to help raise a lot of money because I think everybody is capable of a meaningful gift to support the community. I know my family was the beneficiary of that, and I now know that it's a mitzvah to ask for money for your community and for other people. I didn't know that, but I think that I'm much more comfortable with that than I once was. And I don't know. I'm sort of open for whatever crosses my path. But I think it'll be iterative because I think life is iterative. I think we just build onto things and end up in places that we never saw coming.
Well, that would be a nice thing if it was a good thing that came.
It isn't, it isn't always. But I think that our stories are valuable to other people. I mean, look at what you guys have done in terms of creating this whole movement of goodness, and everybody is so responsive to that, whether they know you personally or they don't. I mean, I get to call you friend, and that's really special to me. But people want to go towards the light. I do think so, and I want to. So this isn't
then you have to be the light,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I find that
Yep.
if you want to live in the light, just be it. You can't wait for other people.
I agree with that, and I also think like an active spiritual life is really fulfilling, really joyful.
I agree with you. I wish I don't get it as much from religion as I thought I would. I think, at least for myself, I like taking spirituality from many religions.
I think probably a lot of the spirituality is pretty much the same in a lot of religions.
From what I'm finding is that there's so much commonality in even amongst spiritual people that those are the things that the patterns that I look for are what are the things that every religion seems to incorporate.
My husband and I went on a trip to Southeast Asia earlier this year, and I had never been in any of the countries that I went to, and I was really drawn to Buddhism, and I was really drawn to the sacred spaces. They felt super sacred to me, and it wasn't something didn't know anything about, and I think there was like an intentionality about it that I understood. Sometimes there are actions that we take, and the feelings follow the actions. Like you do something good and then you feel good, or you do something for someone and then you feel something. And that I think is pretty common, and that's actually pretty spiritual, because sometimes we do things because we're supposed to, right? And I find that sometimes just doing the things leads to the feelings that are really valuable and the ones that fill me up.
Yes, well, this goes along with doing something you're passionate about.
Yes,
staying passionate.
I think that also, when you're going to volunteer and you're going to work in nonprofits, I think there has to be, for me, there are a lot of causes and a lot of good things, projects that people are working on, and I try to support anybody who comes to me with like something that I think is valuable, and in whatever way I can. They ask me to show up for something or give to something, I will always try to participate in that, because we can't do everything. But the fact that something is really special to someone is what I think drives them to move forward and higher in that area. So for me, I have such gratitude. It's such a part of my identity, being Jewish. And there was so much poured into the community that my family benefited from, that those were always really Jewish values, which are not really that different than other religions' values, but those are the ones that I was raised with. And so they were it was a very natural experience. It's a natural intertwining of action and feeling and values. So it's not just going out to do positive things, though those things do make me feel good. If there's a personal connection that drives you, you get really brave and you get really determined and you get really persevering. You don't give up, which is exactly probably why we're sitting here today.
So, I mean, is there something to take away from that? Find something that you personally, it touches you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, when you find something that really speaks to you,
you stop counting the hours you
then
volunteered.
Right. And this is like, passion projects. And I've made it part of what I want people to understand from listening to all of the speakers here is that every one of the people that I speak to is passionate about what they do. Mm-hmm. Because I don't need to talk to people that are on the fence about what they do.
Right.
Because a lot of people are, because
right.
they're not doing what they really want to be doing. It's not satisfying and they have to do it. And maybe it's just the way that they support themselves or
right.
they don't have any other options. But, in this world where it's a luxury to be able to do what you want to do.
Absolutely.
And you do something that actually helps other people instead of just laying on a chaise lounge sipping a cocktail mm-hmm. all day, because you know what, we could be doing that too, but you actually just go and get your hands dirty and you love every minute of it because people are benefiting from this, and when you see the results of that is what moves you.
Mm-hmm.
So
it does.
We have to find ways to be moved, to feel connected.
Sometimes they find you
and sometimes they find you, but you find something that you connect to that is meaningful, mm-hmm. and it will drive you to do more, to do better, to do bigger, to help more people. And like with you, it sounds like you're kind of leveling up. Like you get to a certain level with your philanthropy and then you decide, you know what, I could do more. Mm-hmm. I can get more people involved. I can go to a higher level. And I think if you look at philanthropists, the higher you get in philanthropy, the more impactful you want to be and the more people you want to influence. Mm-hmm. If you look at some of the biggest philanthropists like Bill and Melinda Gates, mm-hmm. I had the pleasure of going to their headquarters in Seattle many years ago. And while I was walking around in there, I noticed that the initiatives that they sponsor are huge. Like they are trying to find cures for or provide cures for disease in Africa, which has nothing to do with them, really, because they're isolated in wherever they live in Washington, but they can impact millions of people with life-saving treatments mm-hmm. that would otherwise not have access to them, and they're not really that expensive per person.
Right.
But it requires so much to give it to everybody, mm-hmm. and they do that because that's just the kind of people that they are. But their goal in philanthropy is to help as many people as possible, as much as they can. And like you're kind of leveling up too. And I'm really excited to see where you go with this, Heather.
Thank you.
Because you are definitely an all-star.
I feel like I'm growing up, so it's kind of cool.
No, you are definitely an all-star, not only in our community, because I know how much we all appreciate having your talent, your drive, your kindness, you're a great person to have because everybody feels good around you.
Oh, thank you.
No, I sincerely mean that.
That's so kind.
And your husband too. You're both. I love being around you too.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, you're okay.
Thank
you. But the reason I bring this up is people like Heather, they are the people that will help the most people and do the most good because they don't stop. They get to a certain level and they don't just level out. They keep going. They keep doing more and trying to help more people. And these are the people that we need. You will make a difference in your lifetime and many, many people's lives because of this.
I feel like that really energizes me. And I feel like because of the way the work that I do is executed, that I probably will never know most of them. And that is just okay. Like for the goodness to land in people's lives and their sub communities, if we help somebody move through an emergency situation and we provide them with a little bit of assistance to get through a rough time, or we invest in, teenagers to help them feel safe and embracing their Jewish identity. They have such long-lasting light to come from that, and that I will never know all this where it lands is just okay. But I will tell you, I thought of one really cool experience that I had, too, actually. One, I was in the Holocaust Museum in D.C. with a bunch of my National Women's Philanthropy sisters, and we were wearing our Lions of Judah, which indicates that we are a certain level of philanthropists.
Can you
within
show
the
the
system.
camera that?
Yeah, I wear this
camera
really
right
proudly.
Here. Yeah,
there
show us your Line of Judah.
And all of the docents in the Holocaust Museum are survivors. And we got into the elevator, and this little lady was the elevator lady, and she said, "Oh, you're Lions of Judah. I know what you do, and I know what you've done, and thank you so much." And we were just silenced with humility, because we don't expect to get those kind of moments, but when they do, they really stick on you. And then another time, this happened just recently, we had been participating in scholarships to send some kids on the March of the Living in Poland. Mm-hmm. And we had some videos of them singing in some beautiful spaces where some terrible things had happened in Poland. And we put it on a community message, just to kind of share the work that we're doing at Jewish Federation, just that life is continuing, Jewish life is continuing. And this gentleman, this very old gentleman who was a Holocaust survivor somewhere in Orange County, wrote a handwritten letter to the Jewish Federation and to me, describing his story and thanking us for the work that we do. And it was just one of those moments that you keep forever, and you never expect to get them, but when you do, boy, you just hold on to those, because it makes everything worthwhile.
Yes, and for every one of those that you get, you can imagine there are thousands of people that would like to thank you that don't know how to.
Well, it's not a me, it's a we, for sure.
For sure, so, but it's a you also.
Yeah,
I will say that. And on that note, this was sent to me by an artist from the Netherlands who 6 years after what happened to my family tells me that she is still thinking about our family and wanted us to have this beautiful artwork, which is a gorgeous rock. And she's made several of them for us, this one as well. Yeah.
I think the ripple effect of trauma and tragedy is deep and broad, but so is the ripple effect of goodness and healing. It just, the pond, skip the rock in the pond, and the ripple effect is really huge. And that is testament to that principle. Well,
that's been another episode of Pep Talks with Jeanne, and I'd like to thank our guest, Heather Kline, for joining us today.
Jeanne, I want to thank you very much for asking me. I was very humbled to be asked, and it's a joy to come and speak with you, as it always is, whether there's a microphone there or not. So thank you for having me on today and for asking me such really interesting questions and being able to have such a meaningful conversation. It is really one of the great joys of my life to be a volunteer for Jewish Federation, particularly Jewish Federation of Orange County. If you are interested in helping us support Jewish community, both in emergency for the Israel Emergency Campaign, or donating to our annual campaign, which provides lots of important programming and emergency needs, monetary emergency needs, please contact us on our website or at our local offices.
Thank you for joining us. #BlazeItForward is a campaign my family started to repair the world with kindness in honor of our son Blaze, who was murdered in 2018. You can learn more about Blaze and how you can make a difference on our website, www.blazebernstein.org, or on our Facebook group, #BlazeItForward. Special thank yous to all the volunteers who have helped with my philanthropic endeavors. Today, that is a thank you to my producer, Eli Moskowitz, who is also doing the post-production for us, and Helen Harland, who is here as my special assistant, and Jay Bernstein, who created the original theme song for this podcast. Thank you all again for joining me. I'm Jeanne Pepper, and this has been another edition of Pep Talks with Jeanne.